Go ahead.
I now call to order the meeting of the regular board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Park Commissioners. It is Thursday, November 3rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. at the Paula Hassel O'Connor Community Building, 733 North Prospect Avenue, Park Ridge. The time is approximately 6 o'clock. Let's now stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mary Ann, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Bundy?
Here.
Commissioner Bowe?
Here.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Hulting?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Here.
Commissioner Leduc?
Here. Does anybody have anything to amend, add, or delete to the current agenda? Seeing none, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing no member of the public or anybody commenting, let's move on to finance with Commissioner Bowe.
All right, I will turn it over to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Thank you. We discussed at the last board meeting recommendations related to network services and phone services that we anticipate providing significant savings. Included a memo in the board packet with a chart that shows the expected savings compared to the vendors that we contacted. Anyone have any question or discussion on the recommendations?
I think we found that it was an excellent proposal and a win-win for the Park District, and with the careful review of the various companies and their proposals, that the one being proposed tonight is the best one.
Great.
All right, so if I will go ahead and move to approve the 36-month agreement with Comcast in the amount of $49,381.68 annually for network services, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All right, then I'll vote.
Sure. Commissioner Bundy?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
All right, with that, the motion passes. Did you want to add anything more about the phone services, or should we just move?
I don't have anything more to add unless
Okay.
anyone has questions.
We'll have a discussion after I make the motion. I move to approve the 36-month agreement with 8x8 in the amount of $27,816 annually for phone services, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, I vote.
Sure. Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Bundy?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
All right. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Hulting.
Thank you. Terry, is there anything general you want to report about before we get into the two motions, or we got enough to do tonight? Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll read the motion and then we can discuss if we need to. The first item is the Hinkley Park Osla Project Design Development Agreement with Upland Design. I move to approve an agreement with Upland Design Limited in an amount not to exceed $89,400. The Hinkley Park Osla Project Design Development and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such agreement. Can I have a second?
Second.
Does anybody have any questions or discussion about this? There's a memo in the packet. Terry, anything to say on this?
The only thing I would add is that when we spoke about this at the last meeting, we hadn't received the signed documents yet from the state. We did receive those on Tuesday this week. Otherwise, we would have stricken this from the agenda. So we're happy that we're able to, if this is approved tonight, we're able to start moving forward and getting that project moving. So.
Great. Any questions or anything from the commissioners? All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting,
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Bendy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc.
Yes.
All right, our second item is the Woodland Park change order. I'll read the motion. In relation to the Woodland Park site improvements project, I move to accept the facts set forth in the staff memorandum and approve change order number 5 in the amount of $80,481.74 to the contract with Team Ryle Incorporated, and to authorize the executive director to execute and deliver such change order. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Anything to add, Terry?
Well, as mentioned, there's a memo here in the board packet. Obviously, this is painful, but it is a matter of fact, and just something that we need to do to move forward with this project. So we knew when we ran into that clay tile, we had to do the exploration. We were running into some unknown expenses. We knew that we went through the permitting review, that we were going to have additional expenses and charges. We did not anticipate them to be this much, but my team and I have gone back through this on multiple different occasions and verified the information and the data. And this is just what the cost of that work is. We've made a couple of different efforts to minimize the cost by adding a berm, which did minimize it by a few $1,000s, but was not as much as we had hoped. We were hoping for reducing the amount of haul off that there was going to be on this. So. As you can see, I did a lot of work to go through other project budgets to identify project savings on projects that are completed or near completed, where we have known expenses to help balance off this additional cost, so that we can continue moving this project forward. I will say that at the very least, even though we're still pushing this season for this project, they have been out there making diligent progress over the last 7 days, and work has been done out there. So. Unfortunately, this is another big expense of this project.
Any questions? Yes.
I'd like to know how far over budget we are on this.
So if you flip to the page with the change order, it's page 7 of your board packet. You can see that the original contract sum was $1,022,000. And then the current contract sum with this change order will be $1,261,000. Our budget that we have available, which is identified really in that chart that's on the memo on page before on page 6. If you took the top two, we have the Woodland Park capital project at $996,000 and change, and the Woodland Park parking lot at $38,000 and change. That adds up to about $1,034,000. So. I mean, we had a little bit of room from what our budget was to what the contract value was, but then we've gone obviously way over both of those numbers. So.
And what was our, you put like an allowance usually?
So we had allowances into the project, and we had of that, and that's part of that 996. We had about $50,000 or so worth of allowances in there, and that's all been used up.
Okay, and can you remind me on these change orders, are they all related to the water, or like that first one?
That first one was a big one. Just as a refresher, we had some permitting challenges and changes where the project wasn't designed per the most up-to-date MWD requirements. And so that caused a big change, and that was the effect of that change, was that 135. The change order one below that, the Smith Group and credit amount,
Yeah.
is the amount that I discussed with Smith Group saying they will be less than. So
Yeah,
they-
and those permitting, the changes that MWRD made are like periodic, like maybe every 5 years or 10 years or something. It's not like they keep changing all the time.
No, I mean, it varies, right? They constantly look at data and look at, rainfall amounts and update things. It just happens with that particular project that there was an update during the design process and before they did this. But it does happen. Like those, there's been another bulletin since that one. That was bulletin 75. I'm going to be living on bulletin 80 now. We're going into this time. So they do change from time to time. I think there's been like 4 revisions that I can recall since I've been here to the shoreline requirements.
Well, I mentioned to Gail that I was going to say something about this because we generally, you always have found the money. But this is huge, this is huge. And this is the kind of thing that I'm afraid is going to go into next year's capital projects and going forward. And I don't know how much you normally budget, I can't do it in my head right away, for overage or, for adjustments or whatever, but.
Typically, we try to do, we approach it a little bit differently on this project, and I think it was kind of missed and not dealt with as best as it could have been. But typically, we try to do about a 10% contingency.
But that wouldn't even work.
That wouldn't have worked on this one either, but, that's a kind of a standardized thing that a lot of architects and engineers put into place. We're making an effort to carry into some of the projects that we have going forward as well, so.
Well, I agree we have to do it. And all these alternates, we committed to doing those? Alternate 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, and 4?
Yeah, and most of them are completed. The parking lot's not, but the parking lot's been, especially because they use this staging now for the construction, with the understanding that it's getting repaved, it's really unfortunate, so. But yeah, the other ones have already been completed.
All right.
So will it be finished this year?
No, we do not anticipate being completed this year. We have a schedule that gets us through to about Thanksgiving. We are pushing very hard and working diligently with the contractor to do everything we can to get to a scenario where we can bring the fencing down before the winter this year, so that the park would effectively be open, but the basketball courts and pickleball courts cannot be lined because it's already too late in the season, too cold of temperatures and things for that, for the painting that totally to happen. The contractor doesn't really do work in this part of the country this time of year, so we are hopeful that it will be everything but that and the asphalt pathways. We're working on a solution where we can have those pathways, they'll be stoned and ready for asphalt and then topped with some limestone screening so that they will be usable as like a limestone screening walkway throughout the winter. People have access to them, pick their shelter, the bag and pump tables.
And sod? Will it be
We
sod?
do not have sod in this project. A lot of our projects we don't because it's so expensive. It's already also too late in the season to be getting sod, so we would put down like seed blanket, and so certainly there would be some opportunities or places there where it would be muddy, but that's kind of what it's anticipated to be anyway until spring and we get the growth in the springtime.
My neighbor put sod down today.
Really?
Yep.
It's so nice.
Surprised that it's available.
Yeah.
Terry, but we did talk about a fence being up around those dirt areas so people don't, we
Yeah.
don't want to go backwards, right?
It's possible. There's a lot of influx right
Depends,
there.
yeah.
So, there's a rental cost to that fence being out there.
Yeah.
And anytime we take that down, there's still going to be dirt and mud anyway. It's going to be the end result. So if we reduce the cost of the fence and put that towards getting some stones down so that it's usable, there's kind of it's an ever-moving target and what makes the most sense. So, and I'll try and balance it within the budgets that we have available and, not trying to spend too much more money, so, yeah.
Well, I hope we can do better. I understand, it's always unexpected, but this one just blows the doors off.
Yeah, I would agree. This was by far the hardest thing I ever had to deal with. I've done this large project before, so.
It's actually the first one that's over budget in the time I've been serving as your lawyer. Terry's had everything else earlier under budget. And from, just in terms of, you were asking the question about contingencies, most park districts are 5% on a contingency because, you know, when you have a Terry, they've been doing it long enough, they get pretty close. So not a 5 or a 10 would have handled this clay tile. It was on no map, no drawing, no anything, so.
Well, it was the first one that wasn't related to clay, which sunk us. So,
I think it was a combination. I mean, it was, you know, the MWRD, architect, and it was, and then the strike on top of all that, right? That was another, what,
Yeah,
8 weeks?
Yeah, well, and now,
It was like just,
and now we're dealing with the delays in concrete that, you know,
Right.
some of us have heard about, which is a problem, so.
I mean, talking to my students, I'm not making any excuses. This one has just been one thing after another, but a lot of people are having problems with projects right now. And Turk can probably attest to that as well, just because of all the supply chain and,
I know.
you know, just nobody working, it's just a lot of combination of factors. So
Yeah,
it's a challenging market for projects right now.
and, you know, some of these, there's the change order 3 with Team Real, that was big, it's just shy of $25,000. That was somewhere where the park district cut a corner years ago. You know, long before my time, no one knows when and where, but they made a determination to put the electric basically a few inches below ground underneath the asphalt pathway that was going through the park, because who would ever dig through it was protected by asphalt. But when it got exposed, it cost us $25,000 to fix that. So, you know, that's not a contractor issue or a permitting issue, or that's well, we were cheap at one point and didn't make a good decision, and now here we are. So,
And I think that we have been making a conscious effort to
I mean, I
do
don't-
quality, even though it's going to cost a little bit more. We don't want to be in that position that we found in some of these.
Terry, when do they expect it to be warm enough to paint the lines and the courts?
May, typically,
May.
May next year.
Okay.
What temperature does it need to be? Or
Uh, I believe it's around 50 degrees is for the surface and air temperature, but it varies. And so there's only a few contractors that do this throughout the country. And up until May, they're south, and they're not even going to bring themselves up into this area. So we have talked to the person and have them commit that we're going to be the first stop when we come to Chicago.
It's the danger of frost on these
Yeah.
resurfacing issues.
Yeah,
So,
I-
like the old Mother's Day adage, you know, if you're safe in
Yeah, I-
contact with Mother's Day.
It's a chem major dropout. And visited an asphalt plant yesterday.
There you go.
Oh.
Certainly, the asphalt.
When did they say
I
that?
asked them questions about asphalt
Yeah, did you ask them?
mixes.
When are they closing? The next
Huh?
They're closing in the next couple of weeks, what did they say?
They said
Thanksgiving.
they hadn't been doing a lot of business, but yeah, on days when it's warm, it's like people almost react immediately to do, probably because of the strike, right? So people are behind from it was the aggregate.
The aggregate
guys
strike in
went on
Portland,
strike,
so.
So everybody's behind, and so it sounded like if it was, you know, on days that were warm enough, they were getting trucks coming in trying to do stuff, so. but-
People were trying to switch from concrete to asphalt for certain projects, but you can't just do that, you have to go back to your permitting authority, the municipality,
Yeah.
run it through and get a permit.
But yeah, they're usually shut down in a couple weeks, but they were taking advantage. Anyway, I'm digressing. We should, I can talk to you later about my visit to the asphalt plant. But, okay, any other questions about this project? I am glad to hear, I think it's good, maybe right before the election, to have progress being made. Maybe it's helping a little bit. Any other questions?
Well, I just think it's good to be posting the updates that have recently been on
Yes.
social media so that the public knows what's happening. So I mean, I've definitely had members of the public say stuff to me about Woodland Park, and it's nice to be able to like point them to like, no, look, things are actually moving, and this project was just sort of cursed for a while, but now it's moving forward. And I mean, there was even an irate email I received, and once I like linked to the Woodland Park page on the guy was like, oh, you know, like then he was a lot more understanding. So thank you for the updates, public.
Thank you for sending me that link.
Okay, any other serious questions for Terry before we take a vote? Cool. All right. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Bundy?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
All right. And the last thing is the bid for the windows at the community center. How old are the windows at the community center?
They were put in 1999,
Ooh,
originals of that.
all right.
Yeah, there was
The
I
windows.
think they must have redone a bunch of them because they're all very similar style. We're having issues with the windows there. We had budgeted money for 2022 in the capital. After looking at, what had to happen and the extent of the condition of the windows, we reached out to FGM. We came up with a plan and some specifications to put this out to bid so that these were appropriate commercial windows that we would, bid for, and then we phased out the project. So we have, currently with this bid, we have the windows in the stage room now that we get done, and then we have an alternate for another phase in case the bids come in good. We can continue on with that. You'll see later in the presentation we have subsequent years, so we can continue on down the process with that. But they're wood casing windows, and some of them aren't even operable anymore. They're just warped and getting stuck, and so they need a replacement. So we're working on that, and without the bid, we should have this at the November 17th board meeting for approval.
All righty. I don't have anything else. We'll move on to Commissioner Bendy, intergovernmental.
Okay. All right, suggested motion. I move to approve the intergovernmental agreement for facility use and operation of a before and after school recreational program between the Board of Education of Park Ridge-Niles Community Consolidated School District Number 64 and the Park Ridge Park District, and to authorize the President and Secretary to execute and deliver such agreement. I have a second.
Second.
Discussions.
I can run through the changes if you want.
Okay.
Summer. On page 10, the agreement is here. First, I'd like to say we worked very closely with the school district. Superintendent Armour and I worked with Adam Parisi and Dr. Olson at the school district on this agreement, and then it went through both the attorneys. Dirk was extremely helpful in suggesting some language. So the first basic change is on page 10. The term obviously is changed the years. This is a one-year agreement, but it may be renewed for additional year terms thereafter with mutual agreement by both parties and signed by the officers. So that's the first one. If you move to page 11, under 3D, this was the big crux of the changes in this agreement. This used to be more specific. And now this is more broad to any medical need requesting administration of medication or potential administration of emergency medication during the program. We need to notify the school district. It said that same thing, but it's a broader any medical administration. Moving down to F, we deleted, I think the school district deleted there was a paragraph specifically relating to COVID and the requirements for the district on COVID. Again, it's more broad-based for covering any kind of district rules in the future, so we don't have to get specific if and when there's another issue that comes up. So that will be covered in that. G, this is a crux of the change that is on page 11 as well. So this is a reimbursement for any medical issues, broad-based, that would come up, that the school district would provide the service and we would reimburse them at that point. So that was another good thing, because it just as a reminder, the reasoning for all that is the school has a nurse, And PERC districts, we don't provide medical assistance, and the nurse can provide certain medical assistance. Moving on, 4A, there was just changes in addition to these spaces in some of the facilities, and unless you want me to, I won't run through them all, but this was done between our staff and their staff. There is a caveat, of course, in that same 4A, if, due to space constraints, the school district needs one of these spaces, that they'll discuss that with them, and we may not be able, to get all those spaces. But, so that was a good, we've had a lot of conversations with the school district over this. So we got in there some language that, due to space restraints, the school district may only provide one mutually agreed upon designated space. They had shall, and so we wanted it softer, it's not like a given, and within certain elementary schools. So just a lot of the nitty-gritty stuff was straightened out, and I believe that was the only other change. School district has signed this agreement, and I'm looking for approval for the board to pass this agreement and open to any questions you may have.
I remember the last contract, and this is very, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. It looks like it's not much, but it's a lot to get to this place, so, yeah, thank you.
So if there's a medical problem, does a kid usually need something after school or not? Usually a nurse to help them out, or what's the story there? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not for day-to-day if they're,
Okay.
it's a specific circumstance and by class to prepare for that. It's a certain medical attention.
And ongoing.
It's not ongoing, so
It is ongoing.
it is ongoing?
It's not like for a cut or whatever.
No, our
Like
staff
for a
is first aid
Right, but it's for an ongoing.
and CPR, all that.
And then, we would have to reimburse?
Yes, then we would reimburse for the specific service.
Like, what would that be? Like, or?
We wouldn't know until it happens.
No, is it a lot of
Depends.
money, or?
I can't answer that.
No,
No.
okay. All right.
I mean, there's an hourly rate for their nurse.
Oh, To come in special or something, or do they come in special after, or?
They would be in the program.
Oh,
They'll be part of the program, I guess.
do we have a nurse in the whole, like, district-wide or something?
No, that would be the school's.
So this would be like if there was a kid at a particular school that had an ongoing medical
Yes.
issue and you had to have a nurse in attendance to monitor their
Right.
situation.
Right, if we have to make the accommodation.
Right.
This is different than if it was in a PERC district. The differentiation is a school district is required to do certain things by law that the PERC district's not. So
Yeah.
that's where it becomes tricky, right? Because we're using their facility. So if we were in our facility and had to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it had to perform certain medical procedures, we don't have to do that by law. The school district does.
Correct, we can do, if you've got at Paderma, even with our residents who have need for medication, we can refuse to have our staff administer the medication. Parents have to make their own arrangements to have the medication. But that is not the law when it is conducted in a school facility. It's in a school facility, they have to have a nurse in it, and the nurse that the school has arranged has to provide the medication. The other similar one is if we have a program in the school building, somebody on our staff has to, or somebody there that we have to pay for, has to know how to work the AED machine. We don't have an obligation to have AED machines in most places. They do.
Thanks.
It's just in some respects, it's just overhead.
All right, any other questions, or?
Yeah, I just have one, I think I know the answer, but does our attorney have any concerns about this agreement?
No, I think it's better. It works for us.
Great.
Roll call, you want to do the roll call now?
Commissioner Hulting,
Yes.
Commissioner Tennell,
Aye.
Commissioner Bendy,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne,
Aye.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc.
Yes. All right, and now on to the 2023 proposed budget. Don't all start at once.
Is it performance?
Get the traffic microphone up.
So I guess I want to start by saying thank you already, commissioners. I remind you that we distributed the proposed budget document on Monday, and it's been posted to the website. This contains lots and lots of details, all of the line items that build up to various funds everything. So, and I really appreciate that we've already had questions and that you are engaged, so thank you for that. And I want to kind of start with an overview and let you know that I feel like the theme for the 2023 proposed budget here is that we're recommending increased investment in the district's most important assets. That those are the biggest pieces of the budget, and again, the proposed document has all of these details by line item, but today we're going to focus kind of on the bigger picture. And these most important assets are our employees and our facilities and parks. So tonight we're going to review the budget timeline. We're going to go over, Terry's going to lead us in going over the capital budget. Then I will discuss the proposed employee investments, annual compensation recommendations, and then we'll review the funding that we feel we're recommending in order to achieve this budget. So today we're presenting again on capitals, salaries, wages, and compensation, and our tax levy recommendations. The timeline is designed to approve the budget as early as possible in the budget year while providing staff sufficient time with the many activities in 2022 to prepare the proposed budget. So we'll be asking also, I want to let you know that we'll be asking for your direction regarding any changes to what we've proposed at the board meeting on December 2nd. So if you can keep that in mind.
December 2nd.
December 1st?
My apologies, December 1st, like it says on the screen.
Should make sure you're paying attention.
My notes are wrong. So at the next board meeting, we will have the truth and taxation resolution, which is by how the board determines what the tax levy dollar amount should be. The recommendation this year would require a truth and taxation hearing, which will come before the board adopts the tax levy. So continue going through and hopefully this will make sense. So again, we'll have the board make the determination of what tax levy we need with the truth and taxation resolution at the board meeting on November 17th. We'll also present the other kind of half of our presentations is the details related to the operating fund. And then on December 1st, we'd be requesting that direction if you have any changes to our budget recommendations, because in order to adopt, we have to have the 30-day public inspection period. And in order to adopt the budget as soon as possible in the budget year, if we approve the budget appropriation ordinance in tentative form on the 1st of December, and then start that 30-day public inspection period. So what I would do is propose it as we proposed. If the board directs any changes, we will make those adjustments, and then you can approve it as amended at that board meeting. So after the 30-day, the 30-day inspection period will begin on December 2nd. On the 15th is when we would hold the truth and taxation hearing. and the board would approve the text of the ordinance. The text of the ordinance has to be approved in time to file it with the county by the last Tuesday in December. And then the first meeting in January, we would hold a public hearing on the 2023 budget, and the board would adopt the annual budget appropriations. Does anyone have questions on the timeline? That, I will hand it over to Terry to walk us through the proposed investments in capital.
Great, thank you, Sandra. So every year when we go through the budget process for capital budgets, we first look at, replacement and repair of our existing assets. We think about and listen to and prioritize the commissioner's priorities that we hear about throughout the course of the year. We look back to our 2013 master plan, and then we look at new initiatives based on, community and staff input. So as we're going through the next several slides, just to help help you see which of these things are being covered. Any fonts that are in black will be replacement or upkeep of existing infrastructure. Anything you see in green will be the commissioner priorities or identified by group commissioners. And then the things in blue would be new amendments. There's an overview of things that Centennial, we'll get into them. So every year we designate a certain amount of capital dollars to replace fitness equipment at the fitness center. Typically the life expectancy of the equipment is about 7 to 10 years depending on the usage and preventative maintenance. We do try to get into a situation where these machines are not out of date, they're getting pulled off the floor because it's obviously not good for our patrons. In 2023 there is $35,000 overall budgeted on fitness equipment, plus there's about a $9,200 amount that's being rolled over for money not spent or anticipated to be spent in 2022. So the first thing that we're looking at is replacing some of these existing spin lights. There's 5 of them that were purchased in 2010. We have this treadmill from 2016. The stair steppers, there's actually 2 of them. They're decided that they only need one. They're not as popular and wasn't so old. It's not being used anymore. There's 2 Stairmasters, which are very high usage and popular. And then these 2 rowing machines that were purchased in 2012. Moving on to the indoor pool renovations. Just as a reminder, in 2018, an indoor aquatic analysis was completed with White & Company and Water Technologies, Inc. The purpose of that report was to identify the capital needs for the longevity ongoing of the indoor pool. The building having been constructed in 1991 has several components of the facility that are at or near the life expectancy. And we've had some challenges with managing the overall chlorinates within the indoor pool space, which is an air quality issue and ultimately turns into a pool water chemistry issue. In 2019, we did have an HVAC ventilation project that we put out to bid. However, the pricing came back then over our then available budget. So we rebudgeted additional money in 2020 to go back out to bid. With the pandemic, we paused this project. Also as a reminder, around that time and prior to that 2020 timeframe, we had already done some work with some of the filters, where we identified that some of the filters weren't filtering properly, and we replaced the filter media, and we had seen some significant improvements. So with the budget uncertainties, with the improvements that we had seen in the air quality and the water quality, we decided with the big price tag on this, it made sense to postpone and hold off. Moving forward into 2021, as the usage increased again, as we were coming towards the end of the pandemic, I'm not sure we're actually out of it, I'm not sure we're ready the terminology yet, but as we're moving along and seeing more usage, we did identify that we were again running into these similar chlorinate projects or issues, and so we decided that it was important for us to move this forward. So in 2022, we allocated some money to begin the planning and design development of this project so that we would construct it, do the construction portions of it in 2023. Also, sometime during these couple of years, we had an underground duct, an air duct fail in the lobby. So some of the ductwork in that facility were placed under the floors, and such that the air would come up through the floor. Well, it had collapsed. It rotted out and collapsed in the lobby, and so we had to do that project where we brought the ductwork overhead. So that also additionally advised us that, well, the ductwork that we were intending on using under the pool, we have every reason to believe that's going to collapse too, because it's at the same age. So the whole project was kind of, in the process of we need to redesign this, rehash it, and, we're going to take a different route on this thing, put in some overhead air duct socks and do a different route for getting air in there. So, and then we're filling those ducts in the ground. So we're currently working through this with White on the design. We anticipate going out to bid over the winter so that this is ready to get constructed next year.
How long will it be out of commission?
We haven't gotten to a point yet to identify that. So certainly as we get, more of that information, we'll have a conversation with the rec team and share that information with the board. So all the TVs there are, primarily serviced by the Dish Network at the Fitness Center. The Dish Network has been a problem. Their customer service is terrible, to say the least, according to me. And the way that everything's set up there is not functionally beneficial. They're daisy chained, which means that they're kind of one after the other after another, instead of individual lines to each individual unit, which means you lose connectivity over the distance of the transmission. So with this, we have an upfront cost of $15,000 to replace some of the infrastructure there, but ultimately this will give a better service to the patrons and will save us about $200 a month as we're going forward. So we're seeing that a little bit of investment up front, savings long term, better ultimate result for the patrons as well for the staff. Moving on to some of the super exciting stuff. We've got rooftop unit number 3, which serves the weight room. This was installed in 2008. Has a useful life around 15 years, so we're right there. We're constantly looking to replace these things before we have any major issues. Every year we take a look at the different units. We have 14 separate HVAC systems plus several of the mechanical systems within the fitness center alone. We look at this with staff and our contractors and vendors to see how are they looking, how are they doing, how they're performing, have we had any issues, which ones should we shift these around a little bit. So for this year, this was the one that was up. We talked it through with staff. We didn't see the other ones that made sense to shift them out. So moving forward with this, it's right at the 15-year mark for replacement. So. The leisure pool heater was installed also in 2008. These typically have a life expectancy of 7 to 12 years. Should be noted that in some of these situations where we do exceed our life expectancy, these are things that in this particular case these were scheduled for replacement at a previous time, but we were pulled back based on some of the other work that was anticipated with the pool. Timing, we wanted to schedule those. As well as just some budget uncertainty and staff looking at it to say, I think we could go another couple of years on this and stretch that. Unfortunately, this particular one, we did have a few issues with it this year. It's still functional, but again, they're at that point where they're going to start becoming issues. So the leisure pool heater is planned for replacement, as well as the lap pool heater and spot heater. Each of these were installed in 2008. The domestic water heaters for this facility, because of its size, as you can see, are quite large. There's 2 of them. These also have a useful life of 15 to 20 years. But were installed in the 90s. These are originals of the building. These serve the hot water needs for all the showers, sinks, everything throughout the facility. So similar to like a hot water tank in your residence, but they're just much bigger because of the capacity of the facility. And I should say, if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns as we're going through, please, while we're on the slide, please bring it up, or we can always go back afterwards.
Terry, just going back on, just on the previous slide, is there any energy efficient models for replacing those that is an option that we should be considering or that you've looked at?
So we always look at how well we can do, how much we can improve efficiencies. But I don't know, the answer to that, I don't know how much different the efficiency will be. I don't know what the efficiency of these are right now. But we always look at that and look to improve that where it makes sense. So we found, kind of talk a little bit, we found when we went to do the boilers at Main Park, those were already, even old antique boilers, they were already 85% efficient. And so in that scenario, we weren't going to get a whole lot more efficiency out of new boilers that were going to cost a lot more. But for these situations, I would definitely anticipate that they would be more efficient, or at least equally efficient as the current ones. So, but that is something that I was thinking.
Just to pile on that, and thanks Commissioner Bowe for not being the only energy efficiency nag on the board, but I feel like there's more and more incentives from the new energy, the state legislation and the federal legislation. So I just we'll continue to encourage Terry to call the ComEd, your account manager, or like the public sector energy efficiency folks, because the incentives are constantly changing. They'll change at the end of the year. And it's always good to know like what level of efficiency qualifies you for those relevant incentives. So, and for certain facilities, they have incentives, like if you're designing a place or completely renovating a place, they can give you assistance in the pre-design, kind of in the pre-design phase, to let you know what some possibilities might be and what kind of utility incentives might be in place to help pay for those extra bells and whistles. So
I'm guessing too that if you redo that facility, you're not going to be, we had to remove so much water all the time, right? You might not be heating as much water.
Oh, for the pool heaters?
Right.
Yeah.
This doesn't affect the pool heater?
No, this is not, these are not the pool heaters.
Oh,
A lot of heaters.
They're really large. That's not for the pool?
That's to make sure you get a hot shower after you have a pool.
Holy
The
crap.
ones before this were.
The ones before this were for the pool, yeah.
They're tiny.
All the heaters.
and then you got the heater for the hot tub.
Yeah.
I know, but look how big this is compared to the
The
other
roof
ones.
has so many, I know that's.
Yeah, but so the pool heaters are recirculating water that's been warmed and gets up to 80 degrees and then reheating 80 degrees to keep it about 80 degrees, right?
Okay.
In the winter time, because I've had to the point where I've had staff measure the temperature of the incoming water, the water in Park Ridge in the middle of winter, we're close enough to the city, we get about 33 degrees, 34 degrees. So, it's less of an issue in the summer, but in the winter, it's got to do a lot of work to make sure it gets washed out.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
So these were more interesting than you thought.
I know, I think.
I love this. This is like my favorite part.
So at the activity center, as mentioned, we are already starting with the replacement of some windows and shades there. We're continuing that. We budgeted another $30,000 for next year. Actually, as we were going through the budget this year, the administrative team decided to put a dollar amount in for every year going forward for a number of years to continue finishing out this project, and then we know we have other buildings that have some windows that probably can use to be replaced, so just to kind of have it on the records. The next one is the solar evaluation for the activity center. For some of you who have been around and listened to these presentations over a couple of years, we've talked before about the potential for putting solar panels on the roof of the activity center. It's a somewhat large roof, and it has a lot of sun exposure. And so we also just replaced the flat portions of the roof. And so if it was lining up and meeting those criteria that you would need to consider that. We've been talking and thinking about this in various forms or fashions for a number of years at different places, but all these things started to line up. And we finally got to the point where we decided that, we should go through the process of clearly identifying, what our potential is at this location. So we did engage with a company that does just this kind of engineering, and they came out and did a complete study, including the structural, to make sure that we didn't just draw pictures of solar panels on the roof, but that it could actually hold them. So we went full depth on this and made sure that we knew what we were talking about and got all the information. So for this particular project that you're seeing laid out and proposed in front of you, it would have an estimated $250,000 upfront capital investment. It does come, we would have solar renewable energy credits, SRECs, that have an unknown value over time. And there's also an unknown value for ongoing maintenance for the system that we would own. Ultimately, this system would produce 133 kilowatt hours. We have an annual usage of 355 kilowatt hours. So it's about a 38% recovery, or about $11,000 in annual savings, not including the maintenance costs of the during the process of this, Sandra and I were actively talking with some other people about moving to the community solar. We currently have certified green energy for all our energy needs. But with this community solar certification, we can get some credits from 10 to 20% of our usage. And really what we've learned is that would equal out for us to about $20,000 to $50,000 plus in estimated annual savings going forward, but with no upfront capital costs or risks for the park district. One of the other things that we liked about that was it kind of helps with the investment into the overall solar and the building of these community solar farm fields out, wherever they're being built. And so we would then be getting all of our power from solar, but creating other opportunities and expansion of solar, so that perhaps you could expand even to the residents and stuff in town in the future. So we felt after looking through this that this was our best path forward, this dollar amount, and we're actually engaged Ansel Blink to kind of look over the agreements to already get that process going with to get signed up and subscribed, identify what we would need to do for the community solar. So we're kind of looking at that right now. Doesn't even include Oakton, because we just, that facility is a little bit up in the air, which would also have some additional savings involved for us there. So while this is not something we're proposing to do, there's been enough discussion. I felt that we owed it to the board to have a discussion, let you know that we did dig into the solar installation, but we are not recommending putting panels up on the roof right now. We're recommending going forward with solar, community solar instead.
Wah, wah, wah.
Got you excited.
I just want to say it's been a 7.5-year discussion. It should be green, and community solar has long waits. So hopefully we can budget 20 to 50 for next year. So
It is not included in the budget.
Okay,
so
good.
It would be savings. But
and we
yeah.
could do it at every building, and you don't commit to 100% of your usage usually, I don't think.
Well, what we're looking into pursuing are subscriptions for credit, is what it is. In that the developers rely on the commitment for the credits in order to make their investments. So it's a way for us to get the credit and for them to have certainty of usage.
I'm familiar.
Right, so.
I'm familiar. I'm just saying that
It
they have to be built. They have to be built, and they're not built.
Yeah, I've signed up for one, and I still haven't. I signed up maybe 3 months ago, and they're still waiting to assign me to a farm, so.
Right, and depending on your size, you might have to wait. Either one,
Right. and
It's
there-
great.
There's, I'm hearing that we were told there's new development.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there will be.
Partly with the legislation and, yeah, I mean, no, we did not budget for those savings this
Yeah.
year, but it seemed like the most efficient way for us to help contribute to building that capacity
And saving lots
and
of
saving
money.
money.
The other thought is, and when you forwarded me that email the other day, I was like, oh, we could do our own community solar installation.
Like
So-
we're a host.
They're giving money to communities to do their own community solar.
Yeah, so we actually explored that a little bit with the one company about, because essentially that could be the idea that we would like have a third-party lease, you know, the roof to use it to create solar so that they could have it for other people.
For this community.
For this
Park
community.
Ridge, right.
He says the challenge there is that we're not even creating enough to offset
Our
our
own?
personal needs.
Yeah.
And the project scale is just too small, we're looking for much bigger things.
But you can do parking lots too.
Yeah.
Right, but my understanding is that by our commitment, that helps develop the capacity.
It
that
does.
It improves the accessibility for residential as well.
So we have other roofs and areas that are, up in the next couple of years, hopefully we'll be looking to do park. Those are things that we continue to evaluate as we replace these roofs and to see if any of them have a different benefit at that time.
Why did you put that picture up there?
Well, we need to talk about it.
Not nice.
Is this the biggest roof in our system?
Offhand, I don't know. I actually
Yeah.
feel like, Oakton has a pretty large
Oakton,
roof.
yeah.
Well, one of the things that consultants identified was that the largest use of energy does not coincide with the largest roof space.
Right.
So. That's
So-
what
Which facility uses the most energy?
The gym, right?
Oakton, gotta be
Gym,
Oakton,
but
right?
the gym was not
Yeah,
far
actually,
away
it
from
is.
Oakton though.
They're pretty comparable, the
Yeah.
fitness center and Oakton.
Yeah. I think I work in government, I understand incremental victories. So I think the community solar is a nice first step. I mean, it was very exciting to see that the stuff on the roof.
First of all, it's a no-brainer, and we could have done it a long time ago without that picture.
Community solar though hasn't been, like they just started doing community solar projects, like in the last couple of, like where you could subscribe to a farm. They started just doing
The
that.
subscriptions is.
You've been able to buy racks for a long time, which is the current way we do it, but anyway. Main South, we gotta work on Main South. They got a real,
Hinkley Park, obviously, we are looking at this master plan, OSLAD grant project. It would not be possible if we did not get awarded that $400,000 grant, which we're super excited about. So we did get awarded the $400,000 grant. These are the amenities that, we discussed and the plan we put together for that. One thing I would point out is that the project is anticipated that it would begin potentially next year in August, July, somewhere in that time frame potentially. And so we have some of the money, a little less than half actually of the money budgeted here for 2023. So that's not the overall cost of the project. The total project cost, which is just spread out over 2023 and 2024, is $1.1 million and some change. So, but this is the project. We just approved the agreement with Upland tonight to move forward with the design, development, and construction documentation. So we'll get on that as soon as possible. So vehicles and equipment. This has been a real challenging space for people in our area right now. So, vehicles and equipment are are not readily available. It's become a real challenge. Even the vehicle this year that we talked about a couple different times and we got the approval to go ahead and purchase, by the time we went to make the purchase, Ford was no longer accepting orders for those vehicles. So we have not yet even been able to place an order for that. We're hopeful and hearing that maybe in the next week or two that might open up, it might change, but it's become a real challenge. So, you know, we had a number of vehicles that we had, you know, requested for approval for last year because we had postponed a few previously during the pandemic. We had those planned for this year. We weren't seeing the availability and the ability to purchase those vehicles, plus we needed some money for J.C. Park, so we postponed. We took that money to use towards J.C. Park. We reallocated new dollars for those and started bringing back some of these same vehicles that we looked at last year, saying, well, we, you know, put that money elsewhere as we went through some of those conversations in a different part of the year. So, you know, but these vehicles still exist and still in need. We're not asking for nearly as many. I talked to John, our new Fleet 4 person, about this, and I said, you know, just based on what you're seeing and hearing, what do you think? And kind of compare notes with what I was seeing and hearing. And we said it seems silly to tie up so much capital money looking to replace 6, 7, 8 vehicles that we're never going to be able to get our hands on next year. So we kind of reevaluated, identified which ones are, you know, in the worst shape and how can we move this forward, what's going to be best for our fleet. So that's what we're doing. So back again here is our favorite vehicle, vehicle number 34. As you can see, it's got, you know, holes rusted through it and in really poor shape. The doors are like delaminating and separating, and the gas tank is looking, you know, concerning. So, so this one is on our list to replace. And then this 2008 vehicle number 41 has about 34,500 miles on it. It's got excessive undercarriage rust, oil pan, transmission pan, cooler lines, brake lines, etc. Are all have excessive rust and should be replaced in the near future if we're not going to be replacing this. Again, this was a vehicle that we were previously approved for replacement in 2022. We just weren't able to move forward with it because of you know, other projects and because the vehicle's not being available. Zero-turn mower, currently in Gravely. This is one of the first propane, you know, mowers that we had. Gravely was kind of leading the pack in some of those. And we've had this it's been 5 years now. It has not been a great machine. It's a little bit challenging to work on and operate. Staff have trouble with, you know, when we have to do maintenance repair on it. And so we did have money populated for replacing the mower, and since this one's been a bit of a challenge for us, we thought it would make sense to replace this mower now. We will continue to look at, when we're looking at our vehicles and equipment, at alternative fuels, whether it be propane or if they get to the point where some commercial electric. We're actually going to something next week, I think it is, or the week after, to see some you know, electric you know, lawn maintenance equipment, to see how that's coming along. So we'll continue to evaluate it, and this piece of equipment is not served as well. And then this item was something that, this is a 2018 Cushman. It's a utility vehicle. It's used for pushing the ball picker at the driving range. It's 2018 that we actually purchased in February of 2021. We bought it used at a discount for about $8,400 as an opportunity for us to save some money during the financial uncertainty of the pandemic. However, we have, you know, staff over there at the driving range has told us that it generally is underpowered and gets stuck in a lot of places where other vehicles or gators don't. And so we just don't think it was the right fit for how we use it over at that location. But we feel like we can get a pretty good dollar for it on auction and kind of recover most of our costs, but then purchase a new John Deere Gator that is more appropriate, more in line with what we've had over there for vehicles in the past. So. Here's a picture of our pool chemical controllers. When we constructed the aquatic center, we used a new controller. It's called a prominent controller. We learned last year, or going into this year, that these old AccuTrolls, AK-110s, have been discontinued. Parts are no longer available. They've operated every one of our pools other than the aquatic center. We just a few weeks ago completed the replacement of the 3 controllers for the indoor pool with the new prominent controllers. And we staggered these out, so the idea that the ones that we just took off there, we now have some parts to keep these going if we don't get a chance to replace, these before they go bad on us. So, but we are looking to budget to get the rest of them replaced so we don't have no pool. So we certainly want to have a pool's operation. So again, at main part, just at the overview here, I just want to highlight that, again, some of this would not be possible without the award of a $750,000 grant for a museum grant for forest view. And if you're keeping score, that's $1,150,000 in grants we received last year. So quite an accomplishment that we're very proud of. So the main part, playground renovation. As a reminder, we did complete an extensive community input process, which led us to this plan. This project is expected to be bid out this winter. If you may recall, too, as we were going through the planning and budgeting process, there was the idea and concept for this additional picnic shelter over here. We did allocate $150,000 so that we could consider taking an alternate for the picnic shelter when we do the construction of that project next year. So here at 531 Forest View, 2022 museum grant recipient again. Just a brief overview of the things that we looked at as we were going through and applying for this. We will be having an ADA facility here. We're going to have some relocation of the animal room to this location in the Nature Nook, some staff office spaces, and so there will be some programming as well in this classroom in the front. Again, this project we did, it's around $765,000. We have a $750,000 grant. It was 100% match, is 0% match, 100% grant on this one. So. As I just mentioned, we will be relocating the existing animal room over to the new property once it's completed at 531. So with that, we have this space that's been used and filled with aquariums and animal cages for years opened up, and so this creates a new opportunity for a classroom. So the idea here would be that we would be renovating this space so that it's similar in function to the ones that we have over at Main Park with new paint, cabinetry, and classroom fixtures and things like that. The Main Park Leisure Center needs a roof replacement. The roof was originally installed in 2002. It's a modified bitumen roll roof. Has a life expectancy of about 20 years. We unfortunately just had a minor leak a couple of weeks ago on that roof, so my original notes on here said we haven't yet had a leak, and I jinxed ourselves because we just had it. So I had to change my notes on this thing. So it's definitely at its life expectancy. It was a minor leak, we were able to repair it. It's really not a big deal. Didn't cause any damage, but it's at that point. It's time to be replaced. So we are budgeting to replace that next year. The boilers at Main Park are the original boilers. We did refurbish them, the boiler tubes, in 2009. We had made the decision at that time to spend approximately $85,000 to retube these boilers versus replacing them. The other major mechanical component of these boilers are the burners. Those burners are in need of replacement. So, you know, the overall cost of doing the two of these still is less than half of what it would have cost us to replace these with two new boilers, and the life expectancy is actually more with refurbishing all of these. And again, the efficiencies overall these boilers were identified as already at 85% efficiency, and so going through a lot of that extra work just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So either way, we're looking to replace these burners here for these boilers. Northeast Park. So these courts here at Northeast Park, we've got 5 tennis, 1 individual pickleball, and 1.5 basketball court. We've got some cracking. Most of the cracking is primarily linear, so it's following like the joints and the seams from when the asphalt was laid. Which tells us a different story than if it's kind of what's called alligator and it's spread all over. It just tells us that, you know, this is, you know, separating at the joints versus it being a major, you know, issue with the substrate being kind of not in good shape and we get completely done. We have already done some soil borings out here, so in talking this project over with the engineer, we do feel like these are great candidates for repairing these cracks, resurfacing them, and we should get a good number of years so that we're able to space out, you know, these full depth replacements that we've had to do on some of the sports courts, because as we know, those are quite expensive. So but these are also very heavily used. So Oakton Park, it's obviously a weird collection of things you see on the screen to be replaced and worked on next year. As you know, we've had a number of things budgeted for replacement at Oakton over the years, and you know, these were the kind of things that are planned for. But if the referendum next week is successful, the dollar amount here would be then reallocated towards kind of the planning and design and moving forward with that portion of that project. So that's what these dollars were intended for. They've been kind of carried through the budgets under these areas. So I wanted to put these here so you can understand if you were looking through, you know, the spreadsheets and you're looking for the dollar amount of, you know, the Oakton project, you wouldn't find it in one big chunk somewhere. You can see it under these various different things adding up to this dollar amount. So, So at South Park, at the lower level, we've got a program room. It's got a faux wood floor. It's kind of looks like wood with vinyl. It is kind of warping, a little hard to pick up on a picture here, but it's starting to kind of warp and come up at the seams just a little bit. The seams are spreading out. This floor is over 13 years old. I couldn't come up with an exact date. I know it's been here at least before I was. So we definitely want to make sure that we're replacing this before it is a tripping hazard. It came up in our budget as a replacement based on its age. So we evaluated it, agreed that it needs to be done. So on the other side of the lower level of South Park, the other program room is the gymnastics studio. There's a handful of windows in there that face west. These windows were originally part of the 2019 window replacement project that we had planned and that we completed at the first floor, the main floor of the building. These were identified as an alternate, as a, you know, if we didn't have the money. We did not. It was re-budgeted and reallocated to complete this portion of it in 2020, but then again pushed off for a few years now due to the pandemic and the budget uncertainty. So we're just bringing this back as something that is in need of replacement. A lot of these windows are just not even operable. And then this one, we're looking at this, it was requested that we find a location for a mural. And so as you can see, there's a brick wall that's kind of part of the structure for the ADA ramp at South Park. Excuse me. Portion of this is covered in vegetation, as you can kind of see to the down here. It's also a wall behind there. It's just growing up on the wall. So, the idea here is that it's not a design per se, but that picture is a representative example of the type of style of work that can happen out there. So all that would have to get worked out, but that's a spot that we have identified as a plain open brick wall that they could use, could have a mural done on it. The work would be done by professional artists from the Brick and Art Center, but we also need to point out that this does require some working with the city for approval. However, we've begun that process with the city staff.
Friends of the Park could fundraise for that.
We need to work through the city. Their ordinance does not have anything specific on murals in it, so we're working with the city staff for interpretation right now to see if it would be allowed or not.
And what was the blue, was the blue commissioner or was green?
Yeah, this one it was accidentally not changed to green, so I could.
All right.
But good, I thank you for.
I'm looking for a green, I haven't seen a green yet.
Well, and I think the summary side.
No green on the solar slide.
I know.
Green right here.
That's because it wasn't happening, right? I think the other thing that we need to mention is obviously the commissioners will have input after this, and there'll hopefully be some more green, or if you have.
Everybody will want their own green line.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. This,
Might be a problem.
this is a new system.
You'll
I've
want a
never seen
farewell
this
ring.
system. You might have created a monster.
I've had this system for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, he's been using the system.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, maybe there was never any green in it.
I mean, the color
Oh,
coding,
sure.
I want to give kudos. It is a very good way to show people that you've incorporated their input. I made a note of it for myself. Good trick.
Also, a good deal of it is black, though.
I was that's kind of the main
Just
point.
the general idea of the
Yeah.
technique.
So there's a lot of repairing in place,
That's a good.
stuff like this.
Yep, stuff like this. So again, as I mentioned earlier with Hinkley Park Pool, we had the same controller at South Park Pool, so we just wanted to request this one. Woodland Park, we actually evaluated the irrigation system at Woodland Park to see if it was something that had to be replaced. The lines in general are in good shape. The controllers, the pump, as well as the sprinkler heads could use replacement. So we narrowed this project down and are looking just to replace these main components of the operable components.
Will that go with our new grassy?
Of course it would go with
Getting it in this winter?
Actually, the other nice thing with these is that, the newer ones really help you, dial them in and, more manage what you're using. We've been really, really dialing back on how much water we're using in the system, so. All right, so computer systems. The servers at Hinkley Garage are about 9 years old. The typical life expectancy is around 6, so we're recommending replacement there. Network amplifiers and antennas are recommended in conjunction with the changes that we have in the network services. They also provide stable backup network services in the facilities where wireless coverage is not as strong as it should be. Then the network switch replacements. The overall plan in the district is to switch these over the course of 2 years with $12,000 budgeted in 2022 and $8,000 planned for 2023. There were no network switches available though due to supply chain, so we're now recommending the additional money to do this in 2023. These also have a life expectancy of about 5 years. And then additional surveillance cameras, as we're aware, those have been paying off for us as of recent. During the 2022 installation project of several surveillance cameras, a couple of extra areas were identified as needing some cameras, and those were included. And so the additional cost is to cover servers and installation and configuration of the cameras that here are going to be here at Prospect Park. And then access control for both Prospect and Main Park. The current system we have is end of life. Replacement parts are no longer available. The main panel of the system completely stopped working a few times due to some storms, and it was very hard to find parts. Prospect uses the same system, so we definitely think it's important that we replace those two systems as soon as we can. So, anybody like to go back and talk about anything else on capital, or I'm going to pass it off to Sandra, and she's going to keep taking us down a different path.
We're done with capital?
No, we're done with today's part of capital. I'm going to talk about the money. The capital money.
Community garden supplies?
Oh, I did not put money in for community gardens.
You might get a green.
Would you like a green line?
I think someone should get a green line.
Well, let's look at the projections before we start adding things. If that's okay. Or do we have other questions?
I mean, you know.
I'm just, so the Illinois Clean Energy Foundation periodically puts out funding for different, like, public sector energy projects, and I noted, and it's like they're gone and then they're back, so you have to like check all the time. But they do have a funding opportunity for PV on nature and welcome centers for up to 60% of the cost of PV. So I saw that Terry had a new roof in there for Maine, and Maine is kind of adjacent to the nature center, but maybe it's something we can talk about. They have an August 2023 deadline.
What's the name of that?
Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. They used to have a broader thing for like PV on public buildings in general, and now it's just PV for nature and welcome centers. So they must have eliminated the general. It's so the Emily Oaks Nature Center in Skokie that has the solar panels, that's the picture that's on the webpage. So that must have gotten funding from the same foundation for Emily Oaks. So it's a
What's PV?
photovoltaic, solar.
Okay.
Yeah, she's getting technical.
I'm not, I don't know the industry acronyms.
I'm just flagging it. They don't have anything, especially for Commissioner Kraft. Dreams. Okay.
Okay. So here I'd like to highlight the major revenue assumptions in our capital fund projections. So as you know, the capital projects, or I'll remind you, relies on funding from our limited bonding and our annual transfers from operating funds as well as grant revenues. So we are anticipating being able to transfer $691,000 in 2022 compared to budgeted amount of $326,000. So we are expecting good results, but as we'll see when we look at the projections going forward, and with all these needs that Terry's identified, it's needed. And as we went through the 2023 operating budget, and you will see those details at our next meeting, the budget projects anticipated surplus of $300,000 for next year, and in the years 2024 through 2026, we are estimating a transfer of $400,000. So because we we've received that Hinckley grant. We are expecting revenues from the Hinckley to come in 2022, which are not included in the slide because we're talking about 23 revenues. But we do anticipate that the completion of the Woodland Park project, that we will get the other $200,000 of revenues related to the Woodland Park grant, and that Nature Center renovation project grant for $750,000. We're also including the city TIF commitment. The last year is coming up, so but we do have plenty of projects that between Hinckley and the completion of work this year at the lighting at Hinckley that we anticipate being reimbursed from the TIF there. We also expect to maximize non-referendum bond capacity. If we move to the next slide, the numbers are kind of small, but you can see in the projections, the top section is the sources, and the last line before the total is our estimated non-referendum debt issue. Because of the so many needs budgeted for this year, we are estimating that we would issue $6.2 million, and typically we've done a 1 or 2 year issue. So this would last us more through, I believe it's 2027, when we'll have additional bonding capacity after that. So we're working with consultants PMA and expect that we would have a bond issue notification act hearing in December in order, at the December 15th meeting, in order to issue bonds in early, the first quarter of '23. But we'll also, determine whether we'll have referendum debt based on the results of next week's election, that we'll have to work to size timing and figure out how that will all fit together.
And that 6.2 million, is that coming because certain things are expiring? Or because our capital is raised, or?
So it's really the borrowing for like the next 4 years, I think it is. And because we have the $3.5 million identified for Bolton and some of these other bigger projects that.
But usually we have our maximum bonding, so we have a space.
So this is filling in for 4 years instead of just 2.
Where the space came from.
Yes. Where did the space come from? Did something expire, or our capacity went up, or both?
So we have space every year and going forward. But what we've traditionally done is just do a 1 or 2 year and maintain that future capacity for flexibility. And timing, because we haven't needed to borrow a lot, we've had sufficient funds on hand.
But I feel like we've always maxed our capacity.
Yes, so we're still maxing our capacity, but we're still maxing our capacity, but we want to borrow again in 2 years. If we do this larger one.
But why do we have 6 million capacity? That's my question.
Okay, so we've always had capacity for larger issue. So we could always borrow more and repay it back over a longer period of time. But then we wouldn't have the ability to borrow in future years.
So
Does that make sense?
Here, that chart filling in that capacity for more years.
Right.
Normally, you would only do 2.
I'm not following. I guess I've always seen it a different way. So you can tell me offline. It's all right. We don't have to stop everything.
Okay, and I can distribute the chart.
Yeah, that might,
I think
usually you
see
show
it.
us, yes,
Yeah.
visually.
And I think we would probably, because the debt fund is part of the operating fund, I'll include that in next week's presentation
Okay.
too.
Thanks.
But we're showing it here because it's a major source of how we plan to fund. So as you can see, the projected remaining fund balance remains positive out in 2025. So even with the $6.2 million borrowing and our expected transfers, it gets pretty low. So if the revenue projections aren't achieved, expense adjustments would need to be made. However, on the other side, as we've seen this year, if our operating fund balances transfers exceed estimates, that remaining fund balance will be positive. So as we consider these capital needs identified, and as well as those which, every year it seems like we find new things that we have not previously identified. One thing we always think about is how much should we be investing in our capital assets? And one way to think about it is, are we maintaining the value of those assets? So this is accomplished through regular maintenance in the operating fund, as well as the replacement schedule that we've been referring to. Another way to think about it is, as our assets are depreciating, are we continuing to invest to maintain that value? So over the last several years, our annual depreciation expense has been between 1.2 and 1.4 or close to $1.5 million. So because our annual debt limitation allows us to generate about $800,000 in bond proceeds annually, we need to identify additional funds in order to at least invest as much as we depreciate.
Can you say that again, Terry coughed? 800,000 in?
Yeah, so I have to look back at how many years, the chart, next month's chart is going to explain this better, but we can't borrow as much annually as we're depreciating.
Okay.
So that's why we need other funding sources like grants and in our transfers from operations in order to maintain these investments. Now that concludes the capital part. So it's a lot of investment in capital assets. It's a big dollar amount this year, and again, it's driven by some of these larger projects that we have been fortunate to receive grant funding for. We're including that larger bond issue in order to meet some of these needs. But we also want to talk about another major investment that is contemplated in the proposed budget, and that is in our human capital. So, as we learned during the pandemic, the services provided by park districts are absolutely essential in providing open space and safe activities critical to the health and well-being of our residents. Retaining and recruiting high-quality staff is crucial to maintaining programs that serve the park community. So as you'll see in a chart later on in the presentation, our full and part-time staff salaries, wages, and benefits make up about 40% of the district's operating budget. And that doesn't include the program instructors, which are typically covered by program fees. So the budget recommends additional staffing investments as the 2023 labor market is expected to continue seeing the trends identified in news reports over the past couple of years as the economy recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. It's been a challenging labor market for all industries. So the board has already approved important benefit enhancements to help with these issues, but today we're going to review additional compensation recommendations proposed in the 2023 budget. So, these are the people that we rely on to provide these services. Currently, we have 55 full-time employees. It does not include 2 vacancies, so we would have a head count of 57. So what we're going to talk about here, the recommendations are additions to full-time staff, merit increases, performance award plan, and market adjustments. So in light of the difficult labor market, we've developed recommendations for each of these categories to strengthen our ability to retain and recruit quality staff. So the proposed additions would bring our head count to 62. Pre-COVID, it was 59. So you might wonder how that may compare to other districts. So we have a list here of some other peer districts. Some may have other offerings that may affect the number of full-time employees, but this is just kind of a little, some data points to show where other park districts are at.
That's hugely, I mean, that's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
Yeah, it's like one data point. We thought, there's a lot going on, of course, at our district that doesn't happen in other districts. Some have more land, some have less land, so there's a lot of,
Variability.
Yeah, and different facilities require different kind of staffing, so it's just, again, we're just showing one data point with our comparable districts, the EAV and budget, the people that we compare to.
So there are 5 recommended additions to full-time staff that are included in the full-time budget, and we're going to ask each of us here to talk about the recommendations in each of our, sort of in each of our areas, right, Terry? Because Terry's is a sort of in his area.
So, one of those positions that we're proposing is a risk and safety manager. We've had a significant increase in the number of safety and compliance areas that need to be managed in our district. For example, there are 26 OSHA standards currently that we need to develop specific written programs for and then reevaluate on an annual basis. One of those such programs is the personal protective equipment, PPE, which on an annual basis, then every full-time and part-time job must have one of its job tasks identified and then clarified what the PPE is needed for those things. Then those employees need to have annual training on how to use those. And as we have turnover in staffing and part-time staffing, that takes a tremendous amount of time. And when you start to think about the numbers of people that we have, that you can understand how that takes a long time. Safety trainings district-wide overall have been done very independently, but having this position would help us in making those a little more streamlined and having consistency of those. It's another big reason for this position. Every year we do have hundreds of full-time and part-time staff that do things all the way from working at the front desks and lifeguards to working with the commercial lawn mowing equipment in my department and more. The trainings and training materials can be developed and then provided to supervisors so that they can complete these required trainings. Additionally, we can track those trainings to make sure that they're being completed as needed and as appropriate, and then follow up with those who have not completed the training. And this is one area that specifically could be improved. We do these things, we do these trainings, but the frequency and the ability to track and then follow up and to make sure that everyone's compliant in all these areas has become increasingly more and more a challenge.
Would that be an HR function?
Yeah, and so this position is identified, would be identified to report under, most likely under HR. This was something that I'm speaking about because of my involvement with OSHA. I've been working closely with Jenny Myers, does our safety coordinator, as well as manages the activity center. So she does this kind of as a part-time of her role. And as I've been working with her on this, on some of these compliance projects and updating things, it's become a challenge, you know, for her to balance all the different parts of her responsibilities. And so, you know, I was asked to help make sure that that project was moving in the right direction. And as we started to talk about how could we do this, we looked for some, you know, some vendors that we could work with. And the opportunities just are not.
Damn, that was my next question.
Yeah, trust
It's a
me,
massive project.
we went there, and it's just not, it's so specific that it's just not something that we can farm out. This is something that we really feel like we need to do in-house to bring in.
And this
so,
is what other districts are doing?
yeah, actually, you're seeing a pretty big trend right now.
A lot of
because-
trends of hiring full-time safety managers because of the volume of work and requirements and trainings and OSHA and tracking and just everything has exponentially gone up. So we even talked to another district about sharing one. This district used to have a shared person, a safety person, and the other district's like, you know, we both determined that would not work because we both needed a full-time, you know, we felt we both needed a full-time, you know, person for that. So.
Yeah,
Are there
so,
just more, does OSHA just have more requirements? They pulled out more.
Have they always had them and then?
so yeah, we didn't really talk a whole lot of reference OSHA a lot over the years, and so recently they did, and it became clear that while we're not required to follow federal OSHA, we do have to follow Illinois OSHA, which is basically federal OSHA. And so there's been a lot of work on Padermo's part to get everybody up to speed on that, and so it's been kind of a new awakening. And so without, you know, it has just been a huge amount.
It's not so much about OSHA, it's about the workers' comp exposure and sort of the training, everything from how mowers are operated safely with that training, believe it or not, and getting new people on mowers if you can get people at all, to the lifting. So they want to see that you've done the training exercise for how you lift things in and out of the gators and how you, and so, well, that's a lot of time to get through your whole park staff to show that everybody's been trained. And you've got, every time there's an exposure incident still, somebody's got to track that. Even though we're down to, you know, you wear a mask for 5 days or whatever, somebody has to track that and report it. So that's been the trend of creating a risk and safety manager to just stay with all the paperwork necessary to show you're creating a safe workplace.
It's like we do it, but, you know, and, you know, the tasks have grown. And, you know, our safety manager does a great job, but, you know, it's like are we covering everything that we have to? And we feel like it's getting to the point where it's, you know, it's getting to be too much, I think.
It definitely has, and so part of the conversations that evolved over time was how do we manage this better, because we're working through it, but it's too much. Like
And it's
too
not
much
just your employees, it's then the risk and safety manager, typically job description includes every incident in the park. So if some kid's injured, those reports to Paderma, then the inevitable FOIAs that come and then deny them, so.
And do we get any credit from Paderma for doing this?
It does, they do take note of it.
Yeah, I think-
Hard to know how the actuarial table works,
Right.
but they do recommend it, and it is noted in your rating.
What's the
Yeah,
salary range for this?
That's being worked with, we're working with Diane in HR, she's putting it out to resources where we did create a job description so that we could get that marketed and see what the market looks like for that. So
We did put a number in
we
the
did,
budget.
yeah,
We
we
can
did.
get you that number.
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, additionally, there's
Estimate,
Yeah, the estimate was 70,000.
70,000.
So additionally, this would be, you know, include risk management. And currently, a lot of these things like incident, accident reports, injury claims, et cetera, are handled by multiple people across multiple areas of the park district that aren't necessarily sharing or talking or tracking or even able to evaluate that risk level and what kind of trainings do we maybe need to do. So it's taking up one person's good chunk of their time. It's taking up a lot of other people's time in various different ways that takes them away from other things that they're doing. And then at the end of the day, when a program or facility or problem comes up at your area of other expertise, that's the deadline that's always looming over you in the primary function of your job. And so it puts safety, unfortunately, and risk management to the bank. You know, we don't like to think of it that way, but that's, when you look at it functionally, that's the way it works. So this truly brings it, up to the forefront. It means that someone that would be within the administrative team reporting out for HR would have this as the primary goal of functionality. This is what they do. And then they can hold people accountable. They're providing the trainings and the information to the supervisors and helping conduct some of those trainings, but if those trainings aren't taking place, hey, you know what, this guy's over here building his grounds, so not going to be training stuff this time. So, makes it.
And how do you know it has to be full-time based on what the other district said? Like,
No, not just that. I think that we evaluated the workload,
Yeah.
and the tasks that, are included in this position and the additional, the additional requirements. Plus, as Terry said, it's like everybody's got a little piece of it and it's just not, it needs to be the focus. It's one of our most important things, right? Safety. So we just felt like it's getting out of control, and it's like pulling people. I think the OSHA thing kind of pointed it out. That was one of the big things because, that's a lot. It's overwhelming, and it would be like Terry's time in his department and his managers, right? So that's taking, Terry doesn't have time for, that huge amount of the project. And I think the trainings have increased, and it's been a trend, that people are hiring. There's we go through different trends of hiring different kind of positions in park districts. HR was never a thing, right? Now you can't imagine not having an HR manager, right? But it's just the requirements just keep coming at us, unfunded mandates, all this kind of stuff. And a lot of them have to do with safety.
Yeah, and so, as I mentioned, this is the responsibility of our activity center manager, who has it as a shared, responsibility. And she has said to me that it has crept up and crept up and crept up, and it easily occupies 50% of her time. And so it's
So we're lucky that she's very experienced, because
she
she can, like April and I thought too, she can do her job. She's very experienced at her, at the activity center. And this is a way to get her more, broad-based experience. So, and she wanted it,
And other people are picking, so like you've got a percentage of the person there full-time, and you've got other people across the district, including my time, and people in the finance area, and people in the HR area right now that are all doing different functions of this. It was pretty quick and easy to see how this could easily be. And we're not doing any of these things to the full 100% capacity of where we should be doing it. It became
we're doing
very easy
enough,
to see
right?
how 100%.
You have at least like 10 people doing it as 10% of their time.
Right. And then somebody
On
doing
a
it
team,
50%.
Yeah, and so it's,
And it makes us nervous because it's too important to let slide, right? There's so much risk in what we do.
and the people who, I sometimes feel overburdened by like side administrative stuff. It's almost like I don't have enough time
Right.
to do my job, like what I was hired to do, and if that crowds in enough people, it keeps them from doing as good of a job as they could at their other core functions, so.
Well, it sounds like it's a potential reduction of liability as well.
Yeah.
So, that's always, that alone could theoretically offset the cost of the employee.
Yeah, exactly. Some of those are unknown costs until they happen, right?
But then they can be really crazy expensive.
Exactly, exactly, yeah. There's lawsuits.
Well, and even just, the safety aspect, you get a couple of employees that don't get injured because we had a chance to get through the trainings that they didn't hurt, saves us a tremendous amount of time and effort and energy, and then not just doing that, so. All right, so nothing else on that one, I'm gonna pass it along to the next position.
This is under my purview. We're recommending adding an information technology support specialist. This is to address increased support for our expanding technology needs. The main focus of this position is to assist with software support specifically for RecTrek, but also for other software applications as needed, and other general IT support. A couple little data points that IT tickets in 2022 were 1,350 to date, and there were 1,121, and approximately 540 of the tickets this year were related to the rec track software system. It would provide relief for issues including memberships, leagues, registrations that proved to be time-consuming for resolution on the IT staff and as well as recreation staff. So similar is time that people are spending working on getting these things resolved, that if we have the support, they can do their duties better and more efficiently. By adding this as a full-time position, it would also eliminate the seasonal temporary staff contractual expense that we also have currently been incurring. And other districts with similar positions, including Elmhurst, Hoffman Schools.
So Go Technology, is that who it would replace or no? Or isn't that who
Go
we contract with?
Technology is who we use more for consulting and for implementing projects, and they helped with review, for example, of these the network and phone contracts. But we also have dollars budgeted for temporary staff. In the summer, we've been bringing someone on to help with the various needs during the busy summer season.
How many
Printers
new
not
IT
working.
Staff facing, staff facing or public facing?
Well, as IT support is more, it's staff facing, but it's for, the facilities that are in the summer when the credit card reader's going down or the printer's not working.
Yeah, but our staff would call them and say, there's a problem with this membership.
Yeah. Are you asking, like, would this be helping Susie Public with her registration hiccups? Is that?
Well, I'm just, when it says membership leagues, is it like for the public?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I wondered to see.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking about the temporary seasonal.
Well, no, I mean,
So this is more staff issues, and in entering this in rec track and having consistency in how it's showing up, and ultimately it affects how, I guess, the public is seeing it on the website.
so we automated a bunch of stuff, but we created work for someone to manage now.
How many are in the Eileen's staff? How many are in the?
There's 2 full-time currently.
Two, so Eileen and someone else? Okay, so
And-
you're looking
and-
for a third?
Correct.
Yeah, and the other full-time is more hardware related. We don't have anybody for software, really, so there's another hole.
And we're using all these new programs, right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
For payroll management and
Right,
record.
and those needs have expanded, and then there's other, like the e-pact, and there's a number of other softwares that have, every year there's new things. Yeah.
And what's the salary range?
We can get those next time. if you want.
You said 5 people for 321,000.
Yeah, that's
It's
the
about
total.
50,000.
Yeah, the total is 321 for all the positions. We can get you the breakdown if you want.
Well, and then I guess also for this particular one, see, like, compared to the offset for not having to have the seasonal temporary staff, I think would also be a good, because it's not just the straight salary, it's also the straight salary versus the
Yes.
costs that are being eliminated.
So the estimated salary is about 50,000, 50 to 55, I think, and the offset of reduction in IT consulting is 40,000. So it almost pays for it.
Wow.
All right.
Well, that should have been up there.
See that?
Yeah, that should be up there.
That's the
We'll move on,
salary, it's
yeah.
not including benefits.
Yeah.
But still, like, that's a pretty big offset.
All right, I'm next. We're proposing to add a digital marketing specialist. This position would replace the current part-time marketing assistant. So there is also a corresponding budget reduction of expenses for part-time salaries as a result. That's about $15,000 a year right now. Although I think if I was budgeting for it next year, I have to increase the salary because as minimum wage has gone up, the salary hasn't, and it's been harder to get qualified candidates for it. Marketing media continues to move to digital formats, and we're only touching the surface on what we can do in this area. So having a full-time person would not only expand what we currently do, but would also increase the quality of the work. The person would be responsible for the content creation and management of the district's website, social media accounts, online listing, email communications, digital marketing campaigns, and the photo and video content development. Position would also work very closely with our full-time graphics communications specialist, so the look of our marketing content would be more cohesive. Creating the full-time position would also help with employee retention. Currently, the part-time marketing assistant position attracts a degreed entry-level candidate. And they use this position to gain experience and then leave for full-time opportunities elsewhere. And our current person in the part-time position just resigned last week, and her last day will be on November 10th. She's been with us 14 months. She's leaving for a full-time social media position at another district, at a smaller district. What we're proposing with the full-time position is a candidate with more experience, like 3 to 4 years of marketing design experience. So somebody that's a little further along in their career, and with it being full-time, it should attract professionals looking to expand and grow, as opposed to someone really just needing a job in their field and frankly just taking it to get some experience and then move on to something full-time later. We also took a look at our peer districts and in terms of staff size, and the results on the chart is really comparable to what you saw earlier in the one Sandra presented, with the majority of our peer districts having larger staffs. There's also asterisks on a couple of districts that also contract out work, and when I started, we did actually contract out work for sponsorship and also design. Cut the sponsorship contracted work in, I think it's 2016. So I do that now instead of
What do you mean
contracting.
by sponsorship?
We had a sponsorship coordinator that went out and tried to get sponsorship
Okay.
for the district. And then there was contracted design work, and with COVID, we cut that and we haven't brought it back. So the graphics specialist has taken over that contracted work. So we haven't been budgeting for that in a couple of years either. So
this would make it 3 for us.
right. The salary is budgeted at $60,000. I looked up some other postings for the position, and they're usually around 55 to 60. So we budgeted at 60, but Diane still needs to get the position created.
And how much does approximately what was the salary of the part-time position?
It was about $15,000 a year, but what I said at the beginning is I would need to raise that
Anyway.
hourly rate, because we haven't been raising it as
And I think that
minimum wage has gone up, so it's at $14 an hour. So now it's at minimum wage. When we started it, it was like $4 or $5 above minimum wage, so we haven't been keeping up with it.
Well, and I think also the cutting of the design, and the sponsorship, and that's put more on Margaret and the graphic specialist. So.
Next to our recreation, we are proposing a registrar at the Centennial Fitness Center. This position is to support the front desk operations. In addition to general park district registrations, the registrar would assist the fitness center operations with delinquent payments, front desk staff training, open gym schedules, cash control sheets, and rentals. So pre-COVID, we did have 2 positions that took on this role. One was IMRF and one was a part-time position. So since then, full-time staff has been taking on these tasks. And with the challenge that we've been seeing with part-time staffing pretty much across the board, the full-time staff on site, in addition to these duties, is regularly subbing in for vacancies and short staff, which is constantly taking them away from other duties. The most important in staff's opinion is focus more, again, on membership recruitment and retention. So that's really what's been taking time away from doing. The plan for this position is to work a late morning to the evening shift to better serve the customers in the evening hours primarily. And also that's when we've seen the highest turnover in the part-time staff and staff not showing up as, after school and evening hours. We also will see a reduction in part-time staffing for this position. So Nature Center Program Naturalist is our second proposal. So with the expansion to another facility that we've already discussed and the addition of program space, we're proposing to add another full-time program naturalist position. And this isn't budgeted to begin until August of 2023. And we would anticipate this would be another DCFS teacher qualified position and will allow for expansion of the Nature Center preschool to add another Monday through Friday morning class. Additionally, nature classes could be expanded into the other facility eventually and could include kindergarten keepers, toddler tree school, and animal tails, just to name a few. So classes would increase in the fall with this position and then expand further once the animals are relocated to the new facility and the current animal room is renovated into a new classroom.
How many work with the Nature Center right now?
Full-time?
Yeah.
Full-time we have 3.
And then how many part-time?
All part-time. There's 2 IMRF and then lots of part-time staff. But I would have to get back to
2 IMRFs.
And those are constantly rotating.
What's IMRF?
That's where you don't give benefits, full-time health benefits, but you get some benefits, retirement
Retirement.
benefits.
IMRF is the pension fund, so those positions are eligible for the pension, but they're not eligible for other full-time benefits.
And it's based on the hours they work a year.
And they can work 29 hours per week versus 19. So that's an additional benefit for us.
Will they work the camps too, this one? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, this one brings in revenue.
Yeah. So this one
It's
is
easier when they
yeah,
bring
this
in the
one's
revenue.
easier than the safety one. Sorry.
So I think that completes the explanation of the full-time positions that have been recommended. As you just noted, that one does bring in revenue. I want to stress though, I think the theme from all of the other recommended positions, again, is that this is work that's being done by current staff that is taking up time and adding pressure and not allowing them to do what their core responsibilities are. And as we reviewed at the beginning, what are the themes that we hear about what's going on in the labor market today, and what is it that we need to do to retain our high-quality employees that we have, and some of that,
They need support, yeah, and that's what we're hearing from our staff, is,
The 2 vacancies now, are they going to be filled? Is that your department?
One's in
Yes,
my
one-
area, one's in work.
one is already filled, right? They're not starting until February.
It's ICE, that's David Santee's position.
Oh,
But he's in that.
Yeah, he's-
interesting.
Yeah, we have one guy in the staff that's out right now, who's open for.
Yeah, yeah. I know there was that brief moment where you had a full, everyone was.
A brief moment.
It literally lasted a week and a half.
I Yeah, so how can we retain these quality employees? The next portion of the presentation is the merit increase recommendation. So as a reminder, what we do is a performance-based merit pool. Everyone does not get 4%. We do merit reviews annually. And depending on performance, the dollar is allocated based on ratings. The estimated cost for that is $154,000. Every year when we do our annual increase, that also creates a wage overrun with SEIU, which would be pending. So how does that compare to what some of our peer districts are doing? We've surveyed them, and interestingly, a number of other districts are also in the midst of a compensation study. But you can see that the increases are ranging from 3% all the way up to 7%. 4% is on the lower side. But we also look at the other kind of labor market at large. So World at Work is a resource that gives this year's annual average at 4%, and HR Source says from 3.6% to 4.8%. So the 4% that we're recommending seems in line with these comparables. So additionally, we've had a performance award plan that began in 2015, and is awards employees for extraordinary performance initiatives at various dollar amounts ranging from $250 to $2,000. And we've had a lot of success with this. We think a lot of employees have done some outstanding work and they have been rewarded because of it. However, this year we are recommending to increase that pool from $20,000 to $30,000 with the hope that we could encourage more awards to part-time staff. As you heard April talk about, part-time staff has been, I think, a real challenge as far as retention in this labor market. So that is one thing we can do. And the other kind of big component of the investment in our human capital is to complete the full-time compensation study for our full-time employees to make sure that we have people in the correct grade and in the right pay range. It is an analysis of duties and compensation compared to the current labor market. It was last performed 12 years ago, in 2010. We've begun this process with consultants in late 22, and it is targeted to be completed in early 23. And again, the results will inform us for which jobs we have that are currently undercompensated or overcompensated, and we'll update the existing grade structures, minimum, midpoint, and maximum. We've listed the cost of the study here, but the bigger impact is the recommended amount for potential adjustments, and the consultants recommend at 5%. So we've incorporated that into the budget. And we may not use all of that. The allocation is pending results and evaluation of the study, but it is incorporated in the 2023 budget. So we have quite a lot of big numbers in salaries and benefits that are increases. Again, investment and our most important capital.
So will we hear more about that before that money is spent?
Yes.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
they'll come back with a recommendation, we'll analyze it, and then we'll talk to the board about it. I mean, yeah, we will,
That's huge.
yeah. And that's just a holding place. Doesn't mean we have to implement everything they tell us.
So as, we'll now review the merit increase proposal for part-time employees, review the minimum wage legislation and projected cost increases for all of our pay costs. So the part-time merit increase has historically mirrored the full-time increase percentage. So the budget incorporates a 4% increase for currently employed part-time staff. And that will be implemented as of January 1st. Before we review the cost estimates, I thought it would be helpful to review the minimum wage rates required by law. The chart shows that the minimum wage requirement currently, how it increases to $13 an hour in '23 and escalates to $15 in 2025. While this is the state's minimum wage laws, Cook County and Chicago have already increased to $15 an hour. And as a result, in many cases, some of our entry-level positions are already going to begin at higher than $13 an hour, and just in order to attract staff. So the '23 part-time and seasonal employee cost estimates are based on current position wages and estimated hours. So the estimate for the 4% increase is about $105,000, and the estimated cost of the increase in the minimum wage, which we've also kind of expanded, or do you have to raise it higher in order to attract employees, or do you have to adjust other employees who are in supervisory positions related, and staff were tasked when they were preparing their budgets to identify, kind of how much was due to these factors. So they identified almost about 200,000 is related to those factors. So the total estimated increase for part-time and seasonal is about $300,000. And then I put together this chart here. We looked at these trends last year, so I just want to kind of walk through this so you can see what the dollar impact is. You can see compared to the pandemic strain operations of 2020, the total salaries and wages in 21 increased 14% compared to 2020.
Can you show me?
Sorry.
That's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
What did you just say?
Especially at this time.
So, the bottom percentage increases, the percentage change.
Oh, I see a little
The
point.
2020, thank you, Sarah, the 2021 actual compared to 2020
Went up 14.
went up 14%. And it's largely driven by part-time wages and program instructors as we're coming out of the pandemic and we're having more programs and activities. And so we budgeted for a 30% increase in total salaries and wages in 2022 compared to 2021. So that's the 22 budget versus 21 actual.
Was that with the full-time people?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the total. The 30% is the total increase. But you can see full-time salaries increase 9%, part-time wages, and then program instructors. So you can really see now that we have more programs because things are back to business, right? Okay. So that was our 22 budget versus actual. Our estimated year end 2022 versus actual is expected to be lower than what we budgeted. And that's because, well, we budgeted for the maximum we could program, we didn't quite get there. So you can see that our increase in program instructors was about 77% versus the budgeted 97%. And we did have a higher increase in full-time salaries, which you may remember, or you may not remember, I'll point it out, that we budgeted last year for a 3% increase. And then we increased that 4% because of the challenges and inflation. Let's not forget inflation. So we expect operations will continue to improve in '23, and we expect increased wages for part-time program instructors related to those factors we just discussed. And the full-time positions include both the proposed compensation increase, filling the remaining vacant positions, as well as the addition of the new positions. And the result is a total increase in salaries and wages of 12.4% compared to the 2022 budget. So yeah, it's a lot of numbers, but I kind of hope that the percentage, kind of talking through those trends and understanding why we're recommending these changes, it helps tell the story.
Just a side note, we're gonna be sending you guys all these slides, so you can look at them.
John that, he was taking pictures.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we should have said that at the beginning.
And we'll post the presentation to the website as well. Hey, so how are we gonna pay for all that?
Hold on a second.
There's 8 more slides left.
Oh, that's it? Okay. I was gonna.
You wanna write?
Yeah, let's.
Please.
I've got people begging for a break. Let's take a 5-minute break.
I need your full attention for the end.
That's why
Okay, well, that's why we're taking a break. And we are now resuming the regular meeting of the Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. It is approximately 8:25 p.m. Still November 3rd.
So this slide depicts, I was going to dazzle and confuse you with a lot of colors. No, that's not the objective. It's showing how our operating fund revenues cover operating expenses. So the many colored bars show the various operating expense categories over the past 5 years and the proposed budget amounts for '23. There's a lot going on in the picture, so I want to point out some important highlights. So the bottom 2 colors in the bars, the dark and medium blue colors at the bottom, show how much of the operating fund's expenses are related to salaries, wages, and employee benefits. And as you can see, I didn't put percentage on the chart, but it's roughly 40%-ish of expenses each year. You can see the increase in the proposed 2023 budget based on the recommendations we just discussed. And the other colored categories stack up to depict the total operating fund expenses in each year in each bar. The 3 lines stack up to show our total operating fund revenues each year. So the bright blue line represents the operating fund tax levies. The purple are other revenues like interest income, for example. And the green line at the top represents recreation revenue for programs and fees for services. So 2022, in the year 2020, it clearly reflects the declines in both revenues and expenses due to the pandemic. And when the revenues exceed expenses, you can see a gap between the top of the expense bar and the top revenue line. So that represents our operating net surplus with which we're able to continue investing in the district's capital program and many needs that Carrie described earlier. So you can see that over time, the operating fund tax levies are relied on to provide funds which cover our full and part-time salaries, wages, and benefits. And in 2023, it doesn't quite cover it, But, and there will be fee increases that April will cover at our next meeting, but we want to balance, how do we manage these increased expenses? So in order to make the additional investments we described, we're also recommending additional revenue. So due to the expected increase in expenses, the 23 proposed budget does incorporate adding a maximum allowable increase to the tax levy under the property tax extension limitation law. So here you can see how that shakes out in dollar amounts. We've included an estimate for new property, which is the same as last year because we do not yet have the new EAV numbers. The 5% tax levy is estimated based on the levy that we requested last year. So the total increase is $342,000, and when we add the new property, it's about 1% over our prior levy. So the total percentage change is about 6%. So that puts us over 5%, which will require the truth in taxation hearing. So I've calculated the estimated impact to the average homeowner, and it comes out to about $21. Last year it was about $3.
I have a quick question. So on that previous slide, so what is the difference? You were talking about how the tax levy usually covers the salaries. So what's the shortfall in the 2023 between the levy subtract the previous? So, like what's this difference here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to do some math.
Okay.
Can I get back to you on it?
Yeah, I was just curious what that gap is between the light blue line and the top of the dark blue bar.
Let's see.
It's,
It's
like it's-
I'm sorry. I think it'd be more efficient if I.
yeah, you just I'm trying to like estimate it based on the bars and then, because it's $2 million between the bar.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
that's maybe
500,000
about
or
500, yeah.
something? Yeah.
Ish, yeah.
Okay.
That seems about right.
And what was the increase in wages and benefits,
The total.
the jump?
The total increase was. That was for part-time?
Part-time and full-time. Part-time and seasonal, 302.
It was
Plus
300,
those
but total is, about 13-ish. I'm sorry. I can't.
Right at
1.3 million.
So that's with benefits and.
It's amazing you can come up with the answers to these questions on the fly. Thank you.
I'm trying to find it. It doesn't include benefits.
It does not.
That's salaries and wages, but it includes program instructors. So,
Oh.
so not including program instructors.
You can get back to us on that. You don't have to figure it out.
Yeah. So how does that compare to what other districts are doing? Now this list of districts is not necessarily the typical our peer comparables with EAB. I have not had a chance to follow up with them. Everyone's working on this all at the same time. But the Illinois Government Finance Officers Association has Park District Roundtable, and I put the question out. So this is more statewide. These are the responses that I've received so far. And you can see that many park districts are recommending an increase greater than 5%.
And how can they do that? Because they're kept at
Good
5.
question.
So, yes, Yes, we're kept at 5, but as you saw in the previous chart, can you go back?
Yeah, your EAV thing or whatever.
Right, with the estimated new property increase, that's what put you over. So then let's go forward 2 slides. And these are the peer districts, and this has not been updated from last year because we do not have the new EAV information yet. But as you see, Glenview has a much larger EAV. EAV is depicted by the blue line, and the tax levy amount, dollar amount, is depicted by the bar. And so when they have a much larger EAV and they're assuming new property, they're able to add additional over the 5%. And if that new property does not come on the rolls, that gets reduced by the, here it's Cook County, but it's whoever is distributing taxes.
What makes our EAV so different? Like your housing stock or?
So let's keep going. So yeah, this is our tax rate as a percentage of the overall tax bill. But one more, and then we can flip back. Is it the last one? Oh, there it is. This is the fun one. This shows EAV percentage residential versus commercial. So some of it is just size, right? But if it's a larger square miles, there would be more housing stock. But some of it is, what is the distribution here as well as to who's absorbing the taxes. So points here, I got this one is. You can see that we are most reliant on homeowners for our tax levy, where Niles is least reliant on homeowners for his tax levy.
And this is why we get a lot of complaints.
That
slide right there.
Like the catalog, like at the beginning.
Right.
Because you
Because-
always have to explain this to
Exactly.
people.
Like, why can't we have what excess?
Why can't we have what Elk Grove Village is?
Exactly.
I'm
Oh,
like,
my
okey
God.
dokey, I'm gonna take
It's
you on a
because
little
Park
drive
Ridge-
to Elk Grove Village. to
I always
see-
tell the story, somebody back in time in Park Ridge decided they did not want businesses and corporations in town. And so everybody wants what these other towns have, but it's like it's like getting your cake and, you know.
But then we have to be able to pay for it.
Right,
And
the
it
residents
falls
get
on
the brunt.
on the residents.
It's actually a double whammy because all those non-residential and all those yellow people aren't demanding any services.
Right.
All the gray
That's
is.
right.
Yeah.
So it's a double
Good
whammy.
point.
You've got a greater percentage demanding services and then they have to pay for it by fees or taxes.
And again, but our budget is, we're trying to balance this amongst fees and taxes as best we can.
But that's what makes Park Ridge such a nice town.
But seriously, I feel like I should like
I don't think so.
on the back of my car or something.
So I kind of went through those last comparative slides, partly because we don't have really any updates and nothing we point out, but again, if you have questions.
So what were?
I don't know if you want to go back again to what.
I think I read it somewhere, but I don't remember what would the percentage, or you can't tell us because you don't know what the amount would be. You can't tell us what the percentage of
That's a bond.
fees versus taxes. Yeah.
Well, I have the estimate. I mean, I'm assuming, that we're going to collect what we requested last year. So based on that, and then based on the, it's in the budget document.
Yeah, I just forgot what it was.
Yeah, I had it up here and I got kicked out.
Can you go back to one of those slides with
Really?
what everybody's asking, the similar communities? That one? Do you know any of those other districts have anything on the referendum request as well?
Prospect Heights does,
Yes?
yeah. They got $30 million.
But they're not up
They're not up
They're not
there.
up there. Yeah. So I don't know.
There's very few. I don't think so, looking at that list. but we can check.
Do you know of anybody not doing any tax increase?
No.
Can't.
No, I don't.
There's no way to stay afloat with this inflation.
Right, and 80% of your budget is people who are facing those real inflationary pressures. So you're already having trouble hiring people, not give them raises or go backwards.
40% is the full-time and part-time, not including seasonal, and seasonal are people too. So if we add up anybody, it's probably
So it's lightning.
yeah. Close, but
Sandra, what percentage of the taxes for 2020 have already been collected? Because they halfway through the year collect a certain percentage, and then we're waiting on the December.
yeah, so it's about half.
Okay. But it's not an
about
exact
40
number.
40 to 45.
40 to 45%. Do we know if that number, whatever that number is, do we know what that number is, like in dollars, so that we can compare to what is that equal to 45? Are we on budget based on what we saw in the first half? I mean, we
Yes.
can't compare because we don't
Finance
know.
report.
Yes, yeah, in the monthly reports, it is, like, if we look back at June, I think it was ahead, actually.
When we went through the budget last year, we predicted a certain amount of revenue.
Right.
And is 45% of that number comparable to what 45% that actually was collected?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay.
So, no record.
Yeah, do you have any other questions?
Kind of from here, we'll send you guys this whole document, so you can like refresh if you have any questions. If there's any, questions, send them to Sandra and I, and we'll distribute, and then give you all the answers to any of the questions. We also, capital, if there's, we've heard a couple things tonight, we'll talk about that as a staff. And come back and ask if the whole board is interested in, at the next meeting. So if there's additionals to capital, I should also state, I had a neighbor from here want a basketball court at Prospect. I'm just throwing that out there. I told them we were talking about capital, and it's not on this list, but
Basketball's so easy to get.
Thanks for sharing.
there may be a donation involved with that.
What color would that be on the slide,
Yeah.
red?
A resident suggestion, with money attached maybe. But, so we're evaluating that. We'd have a new color.
We have to wait till the spring because we don't have the paint color guy available.
And no stoppers go around.
I know a guy.
I know a guy.
Please
So
don't
anyway,
mess up
what-
my- please don't mess up my positive capital
I won't.
projection in 2025.
It's your sponsorship, so.
Somebody wants a basketball. That is so random.
We get random things every day. But anyway, any questions, any suggestions, any
I
concerns?
have a very tiny weird question. We're budgeting for lost revenue from the indoor pool if it's out of commission for however long.
What- oh,
The
that-
indoor pool.
oh.
I mean, we're gonna lose money by shutting that down, right?
Yeah, I mean, all the classes and the rentals.
No, we have not budgeted.
We have not budgeted.
Figured out the timing yet, so.
Worst case scenario.
It'll, yeah, we could figure that out.
It's probably nothing. It
It's
just
probably in the scheme of things,
Yeah,
because then the
it
staff
just-
won't
I
be
ju-
working and,
yeah. Yeah, it just hit me though. We let go.
We'll talk about it.
Not a big deal.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to next month. I
And
mean,
with-
next week, 2 weeks. What did we say, next month? Yeah, exactly.
all right, and with that, does anybody have any new business? Commissioner Grau?
I'm gonna do a report whenever I have something to report. I walked past the tennis/pickleball courts today, and there were 12 pickleball players and 1 tennis player.
And which part? In the northeast.
12 what?
12 pickleball players playing and 1 tennis person.
Maybe we should give you a little,
I'm gonna
a chart.
report, I'm gonna report.
So you keep
Wait,
putting.
Believe me, there's no comparison.
is that one of the ones that is being resurfaced? in the-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that,
well, supposedly we were gonna take that little court away. That's what we told the tennis people.
We're not going to resurface so that there's dual lines.
Okay,
There'll still be the one pickleball.
There'll be the actual pickleball course.
the
not being
outside of the
Yeah.
nets. Yeah, there's one. There's only one. I mean, they have 2 temporary and then 1 set circle.
all right. Any other new business? All right, hearing none, I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners.
Second.
Can we have a voice vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.